Have you ever been sitting across from someone, maybe maybe holding a cup of coffee or nursing a drink, and you are just completely baffled by what is actually happening between the two of you?
Oh, it's such a universal feeling.
Right. Picture it. You're looking at them, they're looking at you, and you are desperately trying to decode their signals. You're running like a million calculations in your
What are
head.
they into you?
Exactly. Are they just being friendly? Or worse, are they completely oblivious to the fact that you are practically sending up flare guns of affection from your side of the table?
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario.
It really is. So if you have ever felt like human attraction is the secret language that everyone else somehow learned while you were out sick, you are in exactly the right place. Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're bringing you an absolute masterclass in decoding the hidden languages of human attraction.
And it really is a matrix of hidden languages. The confusion you feel in those moments, it isn't just in your head, and it certainly isn't a personal failing. It's a feature of how our species evolved, how our brains are wired chemically, and how our modern society, especially with the introduction of technology, complicates absolutely all of it. We are dealing with overlapping systems of communication that, frankly, often contradict one another.
To build this ultimate decoder ring for you today, we have pulled together an absolute mountain of sources.
Oh,
And we really ran the gamut on this one to make sure we're looking at this from every conceivable angle. We're talking about peer-reviewed academic research from journals like Interpersona and Advances in Social Sciences.
heavy hitters.
Very heavy.
Yeah.
We've got dense psychological and neurochemical breakdowns from Psychology Today and the Attachment Project. But we didn't want to just, stay in the ivory tower.
No, you need the practical application too.
Exactly. So we're pulling relationship therapy insights directly from clinical psychologist Dr. Jomana Swice, alongside practical everyday dating guides from eHarmony, WikiHow, and MindBodyGreen.
And to top it all off, we have these incredible, deep, cross-cultural essays that look at how love translates or completely fails to translate across the globe.
It is a phenomenal stack of research because it spans the entire spectrum of human connection. We aren't just looking at how to get a date. We are looking at the biological imperative of the human animal, the psychological traps we fall into, and the societal frameworks that dictate how we express vulnerability.
We're going to synthesize all of this to take you on a very specific journey.
The mission for this deep dive is to travel from the primal, subconscious biological signals of your body through the fascinating and sometimes infuriating evolutionary psychology of gender differences straight into the chaotic digital lingo of modern dating on your smartphone.
It's a wild ride.
And finally, we'll land on the cultural and emotional foundations of true, lasting intimacy. So buckle up. Let's start at the very foundation, the chemical cocktail and subconscious signals of your own body. Because I always thought attraction was just a feeling. But looking at these sources, what is actually happening biologically when you first feel attracted to someone?
The human body's initial reaction to attraction is actually incredibly intense, and somewhat surprisingly, it registers initially as a stressor.
A stressor.
Yes. When you experience what we often call new relationship energy, that immediate, undeniable spark with someone, your body is essentially reacting the exact same way it would if you were suddenly faced with a mild survival situation.
Wait, really?
Really. Your brain signals the adrenal glands to flood your system with adrenaline and cortisol.
Wait, let me make sure I'm hearing this right. Cortisol, the stress hormone. That sounds awful. Why would our bodies flood us with stress hormones when we're supposed to be falling in love?
It sounds totally counterintuitive, I know, but it's a form of positive stress. It's known as eustress. That adrenaline and cortisol surge is what causes the classic symptoms we associate with a crush.
Oh, like the physical stuff.
Exactly. The sweaty palms, the nervous energy, the heart palpitations, and those famous butterflies in your stomach. Your body is biologically going on high alert because it recognizes that a significant opportunity for connection is present.
It's waking you up.
Exactly. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, the body sees a potential mate and it prepares you to act. You become hyper-focused on this new person because your nervous system is literally shouting that this interaction is critical.
So you're basically in a low-grade fight or flight mode, but instead of running from a bear, you're trying to figure out if you should ask for their phone number.
That is a perfect way to put it.
That explains so much about why first dates are completely exhausting. But it obviously doesn't stay as just stress, or our species would have run away from love entirely. As things progress, the chemical cocktail shifts, right? The sources talk a lot about dopamine entering the chat.
Yes, dopamine is the heavy lifter in the early stages of romantic pursuit. It is the reward chemical.
Like when you eat something good.
Right. It's the exact same neurotransmitter that is released when you eat an incredible piece of chocolate, when you win a hand of poker, or when you get a bunch of likes on a social media post. In the context of attraction, dopamine drives that intense, almost obsessive focus on the partner.
It makes you want more of them.
It motivates you to seek them out, to text them, to arrange another date. Because being around them, or even just anticipating being around them, literally feels like a biological reward to your brain.
It's that feeling of just wanting to be in their orbit constantly.
Yeah.
But dopamine is fleeting, which is why that initial obsession eventually fades. For a relationship to actually last, the sources point to a different set of chemicals.
That brings us to the bonding chemicals, oxytocin and vasopressin. These are the compounds that transition you from a state of frantic infatuation into a state of enduring partnership.
Oxytocin is the famous one.
Right. It's frequently dubbed the cuddle hormone. It's released during physical intimacy, during shared comforting activities, or even just through prolonged mutual gaze. Oxytocin's primary function is to foster trust.
It calms things down.
It lowers our defensive barriers and creates a profound desire for physical touch and emotional safety with that specific person.
And what about vasopressin? I see that mentioned alongside oxytocin, but the role seems slightly different in the literature.
Vasopressin operates in a similar bonding capacity, but it is heavily linked to social recognition and the desire for long-term exclusivity.
Okay.
It promotes behaviors associated with guarding a mate and establishing a stable, secure territory together. So if oxytocin makes you want to cuddle on the couch, vasopressin is the chemical that makes you want to build a life with the person sitting next to you. It's the chemical anchor for stability.
Here's the part of the research that I think is going to be wildly useful for anyone listening right now. You obviously can't see someone's oxytocin or dopamine levels floating above their head.
No, you can't.
But you can see the involuntary physical cues that these chemical surges produce in real time. Our sources outline some incredible physiological tells that happen when someone is attracted to you. Let's talk about the eyes, because it blew my mind. When you are looking at someone you find attractive, your pupils actually dilate.
Pupil dilation is one of the most reliable, honest signals of attraction, because it is a direct physiological response to those surges in oxytocin and dopamine we just discussed.
You can't fake it.
You absolutely cannot. Your autonomic nervous system is reacting to the stimulation of seeing someone you desire. It is entirely involuntary. You cannot consciously command your pupils to shrink or expand.
I read an analogy in one of the articles that compared pupil dilation to a camera lens, and I just love it. When you're looking at something you deeply desire, your brain essentially commands the camera aperture of your eye to open up wider.
To let more light in.
Yes. The biological goal is to literally take in more visual information of the person you are looking at. You are visually drinking them in. And the wildest part is that research shows people subconsciously notice this. We tend to find people with larger dilated pupils more attractive, creating the subconscious biological feedback loop of attraction.
The autonomic nervous system provides several of these uncontrollable tells. Beyond the eyes, consider what that initial rush of adrenaline does to the cardiovascular system.
Right, the stress response.
It increases heart rate, which in turn causes the capillaries, particularly in the face and chest, to dilate and fill with blood. This results in a flush or a blush. Furthermore, your core body temperature actually increases in the presence of someone you find highly attractive.
You literally start sweating them.
You do.
You could be sitting in an air-conditioned room trying to play it entirely cool, acting completely aloof, but your biology is broadcasting your true intentions. Your body is betraying you.
It absolutely is, and it even extends to the vocal cords. Studies have documented fascinating subconscious shifts in voice pitch during flirtatious interactions.
How so?
Men often tend to subconsciously lower their voice pitch when speaking to someone they are attracted to. The evolutionary theory is that this accentuates masculinity and signals a protective dominance.
And for women?
Conversely, women might subconsciously raise their pitch slightly. It's a biological signal associated with youth and femininity. All of this physiological negotiation is happening beneath the surface of whatever mundane conversation you are actually having.
So you could be talking about the weather, but your pupils are dilated, your skin is flushed, your core temperature is up, and your voice has completely changed octaves.
Exactly.
This is why relying solely on the words being spoken during a date can be so incredibly confusing. The text, the words might say one thing, but the subtext, The biological reality is broadcasting a completely different message.
Which is an excellent observation. The body is always speaking, even when the mouth is closed. However, while we cannot control the diameter of our pupils or our core body temperature, we do have control over our larger physical movements.
That is the perfect bridge into what we found next in the stack.
Right.
We're moving from the autonomic biology that you have zero control over into the nonverbal matrix of behavioral flirting. Let's decode the actual deliberate movements people make when they're interested. The sources spend a lot of time on something called removing physical barriers.
Body language is a fascinating area of study because it exists in this liminal space between subconscious leakage and deliberate messaging. When we analyze the physical actions that signal interest, the removal of physical barriers is one of the most prominent and reliable indicators.
Give us an example.
Imagine a scenario where you are sitting across from someone at a small table. If they take their coffee cup, their phone, or even a tall menu and move it out of the space directly between the two of you, putting it off to the side, they are subconsciously clearing a path.
They are literally taking down the walls.
Yes, they are opening up the physical channel of connection. It signals that they want nothing blocking their access to you, even something as trivial as a water glass.
That's amazing.
Conversely, if someone is uncomfortable or disinterested, they will often use objects as shields, clutching a drink in front of their chest or placing their bag on the table between you.
Another massive indicator the sources highlight is mirroring. I find this one so interesting because I catch myself doing it all the time with friends, not just on dates. You take a sip of water right after the person you're talking to takes a sip.
Yeah.
Or they cross their legs right after you cross yours. They lean on their left elbow, you lean on your right elbow. What is the psychological mechanism behind that?
Mirroring is a deeply ingrained pro-social behavior. We subconsciously copy a partner's posture, gestures, or actions as a way to build rapport and establish a bond.
It's like saying, I'm like you.
Exactly. From a psychological standpoint, seeing our own movements reflected back at us creates a sense of safety and familiarity. It makes the other person feel at ease and non-verbally signals we are on the same page, we are aligned. When you see mirroring happening on a date, it is a very strong indicator that the person is highly attuned to your presence and is seeking to establish harmony.
And we have to talk about body orientation. The sources get very specific about the angling of the pelvis and the torso.
Body orientation is crucial. If someone is genuinely engaged in a conversation with you and feels an attraction, their feet, their pelvis, and their torso will generally point directly toward you. They are centering you in their physical space.
And if they aren't.
If they are talking to you, perhaps even smiling, but their feet or their pelvis are pointed away from you, perhaps toward the door or another group of people, their brain is literally signaling a desire to exit the interaction. The feet rarely lie.
So if their torso is facing you, look at the tilt. Leaning in is another classic sign. The guides point out that leaning in demonstrates a desire to close the physical gap and increase proximity. It shows that they are fully engaged not just in the topic of conversation, but in your physical presence.
Let us revisit eye contact, but this time not as an involuntary pupil response, but as a behavioral choice. Locking eyes for more than 3 seconds across a room is a massive, deliberate indicator. The sources point out that sustained mutual gaze isn't merely a sign of interest. It actually triggers the release of those love hormones we discussed earlier.
So by choosing to hold that gaze, you are actively initiating a chemical bond in the other person's brain. You are hacking their oxytocin sister just by staring at them.
That is one way to frame it, yes. And within that gaze, the research highlights micro-expressions. The eyebrow flash is a prime example of a near-instantaneous tell.
What is that exactly?
It is a rapid 1/5 of a second lift of the eyebrows that occurs when someone first sees you and feels instant recognition or interest. It happens so fast you might not consciously register it, but your brain picks up on it as a welcoming, positive signal.
You also see subconscious grooming or preening behaviors, right? Adjusting a collar, smoothing down a shirt, touching the hair, or suddenly sitting up straighter to fix posture. The sources explain this as an instinctual drive to present the most physically appealing version of oneself to a potential mate the moment they enter your visual field.
It is the human equivalent of a bird puffing out its feathers. It's an immediate, often subconscious attempt to optimize one's physical presentation.
Okay, so let's put this all together for a second. You see them move the coffee cup out of the way, they flash their eyebrows when you walk in, they lean in while you talk, and they mirror your posture. It seems incredibly obvious, right?
You would think so.
But not always, because not everyone flirts the same way. This is where the deep dive gets really complicated, and Honestly, where most of us probably get our wires crossed. The research by Jeffrey Hall identifies 36 different flirting behaviors, but he brilliantly grips them into 5 distinct flirting styles.
Yes, the 5 styles.
Understanding these 5 styles is basically the key to the decoder ring. They are physical, traditional, sincere, playful, and polite. Can we break these down?
We certainly should, because assuming everyone flirts the same way is a primary source of romantic misunderstanding. Let's start with the sincere style.
Okay.
This style is characterized by a profound desire for deep emotional connection. These individuals are not focused on playful banter or heavy physical touch initially. They focus intensely on you as a person.
How does that look in practice?
They ask meaningful, often probing questions. They use high levels of self-disclosure to show vulnerability, and they aim to build intimacy through shared emotional space. To a sincere flirt, a deep conversation about childhood dreams is the ultimate seduction.
Contrast that with the traditional style, which adheres heavily to historical and cultural gender scripts. The sources show that in this dynamic, the man is expected to be the active pursuer, leaning in, leading the interaction, making the first move. The woman plays a more demure, receptive role.
Very structured.
Right. The research points out subtle behaviors here, like a woman palming her wrists, showing the soft, vulnerable underside of the arm as a sign of openness and waiting to be approached rather than initiating.
Then there is the physical style, which relies heavily on the body language cues we discussed earlier. These individuals might not offer deep verbal compliments or engage in intense emotional disclosure, but they will express their interests spatially and physically.
Touchy-feely types.
Exactly. They will mirror your movements aggressively, angle their bodies toward you, casually close the physical distance, and find excuses to playfully graze your arm or touch your shoulder. They communicate sexual interest through proximity and touch.
Next up is the playful style. The guides describe these people as treating flirting as a fun, low-stakes game. They absolutely love the banter, the quick wit, the ego boost, and the entertainment value of a flirtatious exchange. But, and this is a massive but, they often have absolutely no serious intent to pursue a relationship.
That's the danger zone.
They flirt for the sake of flirting. They're just having fun in the moment.
And finally, we have the polite style. And the polite flirting style is arguably the single greatest source of romantic confusion in the modern dating landscape.
Tell me about it.
A polite flirt operates on a foundation of intense respect, caution, and adherence to social etiquette. When a polite flirt is highly attracted to someone, they do the exact opposite of the physical flirt. They don't lean in, they lean back to ensure they are giving you ample personal space.
Wait, they lean back? But we just established that lining in is the universal sign of interest.
That is the paradox. They lean back out of respect. Furthermore, they don't use a seductive, breathy tone. They use a very even, measured, perhaps even formal tone, so as not to impose their desires on you. They actively avoid overtly sexual or physical behavior because their primary goal is to demonstrate that they value you as a human being, not merely as a romantic or sexual object.
So think about what this means for you out in the dating world. Imagine you are a physical flirt. Your love language is proximity and touch. You're on a date and you're waiting for this person to touch your arm, lean in close, or give you that smoldering eye contact.
Right.
But instead, you were dealing with a polite flirt. They're sitting rigidly upright, their hands are neatly folded in their lap, they're giving you 2 feet of personal space, and they are speaking to you like they're at a job interview. You're going to walk away from that date thinking they absolutely hated you. You will misread their intense, cautious respect as total disinterest.
It happens constantly. Or consider a sincere flirt. A sincere flirt might go on a date with a playful flirt and feel that the playful flirt is mocking them or being superficial because they won't engage in deep emotional topics.
Because they just want to banter?
Yes. Conversely, the playful flirt might feel the sincere flirt is moving way too fast, getting too heavy, and ruining the fun vibe. Recognizing that other people operate on a completely different behavioral frequency is essential.
It's like trying to tune into an FM station while your radio is stuck on AM. Just because they aren't speaking your specific dialect of flirting doesn't mean they aren't trying to communicate their attraction to you. You have to learn to read their specific style.
Absolutely.
But as we move through this material, the sources make it very clear that flirting styles aren't the only cause of mixed signals. Sometimes millions of years of human evolution are actively working to make men and women completely misinterpret each other. Let's dive into the gendered perception gap and evolutionary psychology, because this section of the research is eye-opening.
To understand this perception gap, the literature relies heavily on a framework called error management theory, or EMT. EMT posits that human cognition, the way we think and perceive the world, has evolved to make specific, predictable errors in judgment.
Predictable errors, why?
Because historically, in our ancestral environment, those specific errors provided a survival or reproductive advantage. We are fundamentally wired to minimize the cost of a bad decision.
I think the easiest way to understand this is the smoke detector analogy from the text.
That's a great one.
A smoke detector is designed to be overly sensitive. It's designed to make an error and go off when you burn toast. Why? Because the cost of a false alarm waving a towel at the ceiling for a minute is incredibly low. But the cost of the opposite error failing to go off when there is an actual fire is catastrophic. Error management theory says our brains operate the same way when it comes to reading romantic signals.
That is a perfect analogy. And the perceived cost of these reproductive decisions for men and women, historically speaking, was vastly different. Error management theory explains a phenomenon known as the sexual overperception bias in men.
How does that work?
If we examine this from an evolutionary perspective, the biological cost of reproduction for male in our ancestral past was incredibly low. It required minimal time and minimal biological resources. Because of this, evolutionary pressures favored males who never missed a potential sexual opportunity.
Because missing an opportunity was the catastrophic error for a man trying to pass on his genes.
Precisely. If a man assumes a woman is interested in him, makes a move, and discovers she isn't interested, the cost is relatively low, perhaps a little social embarrassment or a bruised ego. But if he assumes she isn't interested and she actually was, he completely misses a chance to pass on his genetic material.
So they evolved to jump at shadows.
Therefore, over thousands of generations, men have evolved to overperceive sexual interest. They are biologically primed to interpret ambiguous signals, a friendly smile, an accidental touch on the arm, or simply a woman choosing to sit close by as a definitive signal of sexual readiness. Their internal smoke detector is set to go off at the slightest hint of smoke.
So that explains why a guy might think the barista is aggressively flirting with him, just because she remembered his name and smiled. His brain is wired to see opportunity everywhere, but the sources show that women evolved with the exact opposite bias.
Yeah, we see the commitment skepticism bias in women. The evolutionary logic here is driven by the stark reality that the biological cost of reproduction for females is phenomenally high.
Wait, 9 months pregnancy.
9 months of pregnancy, the physical dangers of childbirth in an ancestral environment, and years of nursing and child rearing. Historically, mating with a partner who would not stick around to provide necessary resources and protection was a catastrophic error. It could literally mean a failure to survive.
So for women, the false alarm is believing a man is committed when he actually isn't.
Correct. Therefore, women evolved to require a very high burden of proof regarding a mate's reliability and commitment. They are predisposed to discount, doubt, or underperceive genuine romantic gestures or declarations of love from men. They view these signals with an innate skepticism to protect themselves from the high cost of abandonment.
Think about the absolute chaos this creates in a modern dating scenario. You have a man who is biologically wired to think every polite smile means she wants me, interacting with a woman who is wired to look at a grand romantic gesture, like a bouquet of roses, and immediately think, okay, what is his hidden agenda? Is he actually reliable, or is this a trick?
It's a clash of biological programming.
It is a recipe for systemic confusion. He thinks she's giving him the green light because she laughed at his joke, and she thinks he hasn't even proven he is trustworthy yet.
This deep-seated evolutionary dissonance is further amplified by a profound communication divide between the genders. The literature often categorizes this divide as rapport talk versus report talk.
Let's break those down.
Generally speaking, female communication is socialized and evolved around rapport talk. The primary goal of this communication style is to build bonds, establish empathy, and navigate complex social networks. When women communicate a problem, they are often seeking emotional resonance. They want to hear, I understand how you feel. That sounds incredibly difficult. You aren't alone.
And then you have men who typically operate on report talk. The goal of report talk isn't about building empathy. It's about exchanging concrete information, establishing status, and fixing problems efficiently. So let's look at a classic hypothetical scenario from the reading. A woman comes home from work and vents to a man about a terrible day she had with her boss. She's using report talk. She wants to build a bond through shared empathy. She wants him to validate her frustration.
But the man, listening through the filter of report talk, hears a problem being presented. He immediately shifts into problem-solving mode and starts listing actionable ways she can fix the situation with her boss.
Right. He tries to fix it.
He might suggest she send an email outlining her grievances or speak to HR. He believes he is showing love and support by providing a logical solution to the problem she presented.
But from her perspective, she feels completely ignored and invalidated because he skipped right past the empathy she was actually seeking. He didn't acknowledge her feelings, he just gave her a to-do list. The man feels his help is being rudely rejected, and the woman feels her emotional needs are being entirely dismissed.
It is a classic misattunement, and it happens millions of times a day in relationships worldwide. This dynamic ties perfectly into another fascinating evolutionary concept found in the research: cryptic female choice and the strategy of indirectness.
The hints.
Yes. We often ask, why do women drop subtle hints instead of just being direct about what they want or how they feel? From an evolutionary standpoint, indirectness is a highly sophisticated, vital screening mechanism.
Let's unpack this screening mechanism, because I think a lot of people view indirectness as just playing games. But the science says it serves a massive evolutionary purpose. If a woman were completely direct, incredibly straightforward, and easy to win over, she would attract every low-investment, fast-talking partner out there.
The ones looking for a quick win.
Right. By being indirect, by using subtle body language, dropping ambiguous hints, or playing a bit hard to get, she is actively running a test on a potential partner.
She is testing several crucial faculties. She is testing his emotional attunement. Can he read the subtle shifts in her mood? She is testing his social intelligence. Does he understand the unspoken rules of the interaction? And perhaps most importantly, she is testing his persistence and willingness to invest. Will he expend the time, energy, and cognitive effort required to figure out what she actually wants?
So when a woman says, "I'm fine," in that very specific, tense tone of voice, she is almost never communicating that she is actually fine. She is running a test. She wants to see if her partner is perceptive enough to notice that her nonverbal state, her posture, her facial expression, completely contradicts her words. And she wants to see if he cares enough to probe deeper and do the work to uncover the real issue. It filters out mates who lack empathy or who are unwilling to invest effort into the emotional maintenance of the relationship.
The academic sources back this up brilliantly. There is a fascinating longitudinal study from Interpersona that looked at how physical attraction changes over time in early romantic relationships. It tracked couples to see what sustained their attraction to one another, and it found massive gender differences. For women, their ongoing physical attraction to a partner was heavily influenced by cognitive appraisal and specific relationship events.
Meaning, a woman's attraction isn't just a static baseline based on how handsome the guy is. Her attraction fluctuates based on his actions. The study noted things like the quality of their daily communication, the frequency of affectionate kissing, or whether he took the initiative to plan a date night. Her attraction is fueled by his ongoing attentiveness and the emotional effort he puts into the bond.
Whereas for the men in the study, the results were quite different. Their ongoing physical attraction was much more heavily predicted by the visual and physical traits of the partner, largely independent of those specific day-to-day relationship events.
Now, it is crucial to note that both genders ultimately highly valued dependability, attentiveness, and trustworthiness in a long-term partner. But the pathways to maintaining that initial spark, the way attraction is fueled day in and day out, are heavily filtered through these evolutionary and cognitive gender biases. So let's take a breath and look at where we are. We have all this incredibly dense evolutionary wiring, creating a complex, in-person cat and mouse dynamic. We're completely misreading each other's flirting styles. We're battling innate perception biases where men see ghosts of opportunity and women see red flags. And we're speaking two entirely different communication languages.
It's a lot to navigate.
And now, I want you to imagine taking all of that evolutionary confusion, digitizing it, putting it behind a glowing screen, and giving people the ability to completely disappear at the push of a button. Modern technology has taken our natural communication gaps and absolutely weaponized them.
The digital landscape has fundamentally altered the architecture of human attraction and dating. It has introduced layers of ambiguity that our ancestral brains are completely unequipped to handle. To orient ourselves in this new reality, we have to look at the modern dating lexicon, which has exploded with new terms over the last decade just to describe these new, ambiguous, often cruel behaviors.
Let's walk through this lexicon so everyone knows exactly what kind of digital warfare is happening out there. First, the granddaddy of them all, ghosting.
The classic.
This is when someone you have been talking to or even dating disappears entirely. They drop all communication out of nowhere. They don't answer texts. They don't answer calls, and they offer zero explanation. They just vanish into the digital ether.
No closure whatsoever.
Then you have orbiting, which is a bizarre evolution of ghosting. They ghosted you. They won't reply to a single text message, but they are still watching every single one of your Instagram stories the minute you post them, and maybe occasionally liking a photo. They hover in your digital orbit, making sure you know they are watching without ever making direct contact.
Then there is benching. This is a sports metaphor applied to dating. It involves keeping someone on the sidelines as a backup option. You give them just enough attention to keep them interested, but you are actively pursuing other primary targets. If the primary target falls through, you call the person off the bench.
It's so calculating.
Roaching is another term that has gained traction. This is when you realize the person you have been dating has been actively hiding the fact that they are seeing multiple other people. When the truth comes out, it is like turning on the kitchen lights and seeing cockroaches scatter. They were everywhere, just hidden in the dark.
Yikes. How about cloaking?
Oh.
This one feels particularly aggressive. That's when someone doesn't just stand you up for a date, but they preemptively block you on every single app and platform before the date even happens. So you can't even contact them to ask why they didn't show up. They erase themselves from your digital world entirely.
A total erasure.
Zombieing is almost funny if it weren't so annoying. This is when someone who brutally ghosted you months or even years ago suddenly texts you, "Hey, what's up?" or replies to a story with a fire emoji, acting as if they didn't just return from the dead.
Yeah.
And finally, woke phishing, which is a manipulative tactic where someone fakes progressive, liberal, or highly empathetic values on their dating profile just to attract a specific type of partner, completely masking their true beliefs or lack of empathy.
It is a landscape of profound ambiguity and, frankly, psychological manipulation. But the behavior we really need to examine deeply, because of its severe psychological impact and its prevalence, is breadcrumbing.
Breadcrumbing.
Yes, breadcrumbing is the act of sending intermittent, non-committal signals. A text here, a flirty comment on a photo there, a vague promise to hang out. To sustain someone's romantic interest without any genuine intention of ever committing to a relationship. You are tossing them just enough crumbs to keep them following the trail, but you ensure they never get the whole loaf of bread.
I was reading the research in the Attachment Project on this, and they broke breadcrumbing down into 4 distinct pillars. I think hearing these will make a lot of people realize they have either done this or had it done to them. Pillar 1 is poor communication. The breadcrumber actively avoids deep conversations. They will ignore messages for days, and when they finally do reach out, it is sporadic and superficial.
Keeps it light.
Exactly. Pillar 2 is avoidant traits. They are deeply uncomfortable with emotional intimacy. If the conversation gets too real, they pull away. Pillar 3 is a total lack of commitment. They will never lock down future plans. If you ask, "Hey, what are we doing this weekend?" Will they give vague, non-committal answers like, "Let's see how the week goes," or "I might be busy, let's play it by ear."
And pillar 4 is perhaps the most revealing. A paradoxical dependence on the partner for validation.
They actually need the other person.
Yes. The breadcrumber isn't usually acting out of pure malicious sadism. They actually need the recipient. They need the ego boost of knowing someone is waiting for them, someone is desiring them, someone is available to them. They crave the emotional validation, but they are absolutely terrified of the intimacy and vulnerability required to actually attain a real relationship.
So what kind of psychological profile does a person like this have? The studies link breadcrumbing strongly to vulnerable narcissism. I think we all know what a grandiose narcissist is, the loud, arrogant person who thinks they're the greatest thing on earth. But a vulnerable narcissist is driven by a deep, hidden sense of inadequacy and shame.
It's much more covert.
They desperately need external validation to prop up their fragile self-esteem, but they are hypersensitive to perceived criticism or rejection. So their strategy is to keep you on the hook so they feel loved and desired, but they keep you at a safe distance so you can never get close enough to see their flaws and reject them. The research also found high links to Machiavellianism, which is a personality trait focused entirely on manipulation, calculation, and self-interest.
It is also deeply intertwined with attachment styles, but in ways that vary fascinatingly across different global cultures. There was a cultural attachment study highlighted in the sources that compared breadcrumbing behaviors in different countries.
What do they find?
It showed that in Spain, breadcrumbing was highly correlated within avoidant attachment style individuals who naturally seek to keep others at an emotional distance to protect their independence. But in India, the behavior was linked to an anxious attachment style. In that cultural context, the push and pull of breadcrumbing was used as a maladaptive strategy to constantly test the waters, provoke a reaction, and seek reassurance from the partner.
But regardless of the cultural motivation or the personality disorder driving it, the psychological toll on the victim is universally devastating. And this is where the deep dive gets really scientific because we have to look at how breadcrumbing actually alters your brain chemistry. The sources relate this directly to B.F. Skinner's concept of intermittent reinforcement. Can you explain that experiment? Because I think it unlocks why this digital behavior is so addictive.
Absolutely. B.F. Skinner was a foundational behavioral psychologist. In his classic experiments, he placed a rat in a box equipped with a lever. If the rat pressed the lever and received a food pellet every single time, it learned the association quickly. It would press the lever when it was hungry, eat the pellet, and then go about its business. The behavior was predictable and stable.
Okay, that makes sense.
If Skinner completely disconnected the lever so it never produced a pellet, the rat would try a few times, realize the reward was gone, and eventually start pressing it all together. The behavior became extinct.
But that's not what breadcrumbing is. Breadcrumbing isn't a consistent reward, and it isn't the complete absence of a reward.
Exactly. The breakthrough came when Skinner programmed the lever to dispense a pellet randomly. Maybe the rat gets a pellet after 3 presses. Maybe it takes 20 presses. Maybe it doesn't dispense anything for an hour and then suddenly dispenses 2. Under this schedule of intermittent, unpredictable reinforcement, the rat's behavior changed drastically.
How so?
It became obsessed. It would press the lever frantically, constantly, to the point of exhaustion. The unpredictability creates a massive spike in dopamine when the reward finally arrives. This is the precise psychology underlying a slot machine addiction. You pull the lever, you don't know if you will win, but the possibility keeps you hooked.
And it is the exact psychology of breadcrumbing. Your smartphone has become the slot machine, and the breadcrumber is pulling the lever. You send a text, and you don't know if you will get the reward, a flirty reply, a promise to hang out, or if you will get absolute silence for 3 days. The unpredictable nature of these crumbs creates a dopamine high that literally alters your brain's baseline chemistry.
It wires you for anxiety.
You become addicted to the anxiety of waiting and the immense relief when they finally respond. And when the reward doesn't come, it leads to severe depression, profound loneliness, and a completely shattered sense of self-worth because your brain is starving for a chemical hit that the other person is withholding.
Which is why understanding the why behind the digital medium itself is so vital. We have to look at the concepts of toxic disinhibition and moral disengagement. The digital screen acts as a powerful psychological shield. It allows people to distance themselves from the immediate emotional consequences of their actions.
You don't see the pain.
In person, it is incredibly difficult to look at someone, see the hope in their eyes, and ruthlessly manipulate them. The empathy centers in your brain would normally stop you, but the digital interface morally disengages the breadcrumber from the human being on the other end of the signal. They don't see the tears, they just see a text bubble. It lowers the barrier to cruel behavior.
There's a quote from a participant in one of the studies on breadcrumbing victims that I want to read because it just hit so incredibly hard. They were reflecting on how long they stayed in a toxic digital dynamic, and they said, when you look at the world through rose-colored glasses, even the red flag looks like a normal flag.
That is perfect.
When your brain is hooked on that intermittent dopamine schedule, your reality testing completely fails. You ignore the glaring red flag that they only text you at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. You just focus on the fact that they texted you at all, and you interpret that tiny crumb as a sign of true love.
To combat this kind of powerful neurological trap, victims need robust, structured coping mechanisms. The psychological literature outlines 5 key strategies for escaping the breadcrumbing cycle. First is social support. You must lean on friends and family to rebuild your reality testing. You need people to look at the text messages and tell you objectively that the behavior is unacceptable.
Second is self-work.
Right. Engaging in therapy or deep introspection to understand the underlying vulnerabilities that made you accept the crumbs in the first place.
The third strategy is distraction. Refocusing your immense emotional energy away from your phone and onto your career, your hobbies, or your passions. Build a life that is rewarding outside of that digital connection. Fourth, and the sources stress this is often the most crucial step, is cutting the relationship entirely. No contact.
You have to walk away from the slot machine.
You cannot heal in the same environment that is making you sick. And the fifth strategy involves personal grounding techniques like rigorous exercise, meditation, or spirituality to calm the nervous system and regulate your dopamine baseline naturally.
While you are navigating all of this, guides like eHarmony suggest we must also learn to read digital body language. Since you cannot see their pupils dilate or observe their posture through a screen, you have to look for digital tells. Response time is a significant indicator. Are they consistently taking 48 hours to reply to a simple question? Consistent punctuation, or the deliberate lack of it, speaks volumes about their level of effort.
Even emoji choice is a tell. Are they sending you the heart eyes emoji, which requires a bit of vulnerability, or are they just sending a generic thumbs up to acknowledge they received your message without actually engaging? These are the new subconscious tells we have to decode. But hearing all of this, it feels overwhelming. If our biology is working against us with perception biases and technology is actively exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities, where do we find solid ground? How do we actually build a relationship that lasts?
The answer, according to the final and perhaps most profound stack of sources, lies in stepping away from the games, understanding your broader cultural context, and embracing radical, terrifying emotional vulnerability.
Let's transition into that final arena. We're looking at culture, vulnerability, and building real intimacy. The sources suggest we have to start with culture because the way you express love and the way you expect to receive it is heavily dictated by the cultural water you swim in growing up. We have to look at the contrast between what sociologists call low context cultures and high context cultures.
This is a vital framework for understanding why so many relationships fail despite genuine affection. Low context cultures, which include the United States, the UK, Germany, and much of Western Europe, rely on explicit, literal, direct communication.
The words matter most.
The fundamental rule of a low context culture is that the burden of understanding is placed entirely on the speaker. If you want something, you must say it clearly. If you are upset, you must articulate why. In these cultures, romantic love is most frequently and powerfully expressed verbally through what we might call words of affirmation. You have to literally hear the words, I love you, to feel secure that the emotion is real.
Contrast that with high context cultures. The sources point to Japan, India, and many Middle Eastern and Latin American societies. In high context cultures, communication is highly implicit, nuanced, and layered. The burden of understanding flips. It is placed on the listener to read the room, to notice the subtleties, the unspoken cues, the situational context, and the history of the relationship.
It's deeply observational.
In a high context culture, love is rarely declared loudly with direct words. It is shown implicitly through consistent acts of service, deep devotion, and taking on shared responsibilities.
You can imagine the absolute chaos and heartbreak that ensues when a low context communicator dates a high context communicator and neither understands the other's cultural operating system.
It's a disaster.
The low context person is waiting desperately for verbal validation. They want to hear, I love you, you are beautiful, I appreciate you. When it never comes, they feel completely unloved and insecure. Meanwhile, the high context person is exhausting themselves, expressing their love through countless daily acts of service, making sure the car has gas, anticipating their partner's needs, fixing things around the house. The high context partner feels completely unappreciated and baffled because their partner keeps demanding words instead of noticing the mountain of actions they are providing.
It's like trying to play a DVD in a toaster. You're both trying to operate, but you're just not using the same hardware. Neither person is wrong. They are just fluent in different cultural love languages. We also see this massive divide in the difference between collectivist and individualistic approaches to love and marriage. In individualistic Western cultures, the societal focus is heavily on the concept of the love marriage. The goal is to find a soulmate, experience intense early passion, and achieve self-actualization through a romantic partnership. The relationship is about the fulfillment of the individual.
In collectivist cultures, however, arranged marriages or family-guided matches remain much more common. The foundational philosophy is entirely different. The focus is not on individual passion, but on shared familial values, social harmony, and duty to the broader community. The statistics accompanying these different models are incredibly stark and thought-provoking.
What do the numbers say?
While we must rigorously acknowledge that societal stigmas, religious pressures, and legal barriers to divorce play a massive role in these numbers, the raw data shows that the divorce rate in individualistic cultures like the UK hovers around 32%. In heavily collectivist arranged marriage cultures like India, it is estimated to be around 1%.
And the psychological takeaway from those sources isn't necessarily that one system is morally superior to the other, but rather how they view the timeline of love. In individualistic models, intense passion is the starting line. You start at 100 miles an hour, and the challenge is maintaining it. In collectivist models, passion isn't the starting line. It might not even exist on day one. Rather, deep affection, mutual respect, and collaborative problem solving are expected to develop gradually over time through mutual effort and a shared commitment to the family unit. Love is something you build, not something you fall into.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of the entire deep dive. Regardless of our cultural background or our flirting style, how do we as individuals navigating this messy modern world actually build true, lasting intimacy? This is where the clinical work of relationship therapist Dr. Jomana Swice comes to the forefront. She focuses on the absolute non-negotiable necessity of emotional vulnerability, and she uses the best analogy to explain how to achieve it: the airplane oxygen mask.
I love this analogy. You know how during the safety briefing on an airplane, the flight attendant tells you that in the event of an emergency, you must secure your own oxygen mask before attempting to assist others, even your own children. Dr. Swice says you have to apply that exact same logic to romantic relationships.
Yes.
You must heal yourself individually, secure your own emotional grounding, and deal with your own trauma before you can fix, build, or sustain a healthy relationship with someone else. You cannot rely on a partner to be your oxygen supply.
And securing your own mask, healing yourself, requires overriding our most deeply entrenched evolutionary defensive barriers. Dr. Swice identifies two primary emotional barriers to vulnerability that we construct to protect ourselves: shame and anger. Shame is essentially the deep-seated fear of rejection. It is the internal voice that tells us that if we show our true, flawed, messy selves to another person, we will be judged, found lacking, and ultimately abandoned.
So to avoid that abandonment, we construct a fake, highly curated, perfect persona to present to the world. We become what we think the other person wants us to be. But the tragic irony of shame is that you cannot be truly loved if you are wearing a mask. The other person might love the mask, but they aren't loving you because they don't know you. It leaves you feeling deeply lonely, even within a relationship. And the other barrier is anger.
Right, anger as a shield.
Dr. Swice explains that anger is rarely a primary emotion. It is almost always used as a protective shield. It is much easier and feels much safer to be angry and push someone away during a conflict than it is to admit you are deeply hurt, feeling insecure, and terrified of losing them.
Precisely. To strip away that shame and to lower that shield of anger, we need to practice what the modern dating literature calls precision dating. Precision dating is a rejection of all the games, the breadcrumbing, and the indirectness we've discussed. It means communicating clearly and moving away from the expectation that your partner should be able to mind read your desires. It also means stopping the habit of putting potential partners on a pedestal, viewing them as flawless saviors rather than real, messy human beings capable of making mistakes.
Precision dating focuses on finding the ultimate relationship requirement, which was identified by the renowned relationship researcher John Gottman: trustworthiness. And in Gottman's framework, trustworthiness isn't just about fidelity. It isn't just about not cheating. Trustworthiness is defined as the absolute, reliable consistency between a person's words and their actions over a sustained period of time. If they say they will be there, they are there. If they say they care, their actions demonstrate it.
If we synthesize everything we have covered, true vulnerability requires a monumental effort of overriding our baser instincts. It requires overriding our evolutionary fears of rejection, the male fear of lost opportunities, and the female commitment skepticism. It requires overriding our modern digital urge to hide behind screens, to ghost when things get difficult, and to send breadcrumbs for cheap validation. It demands that we actively align our biological signals, our communication styles, and our cultural scripts so that we can show up authentically.
It's what one of the sources cheekily referred to as the sweatpants theory of attraction. The idea is that being effortlessly, comfortably, and unapologetically yourself, much like the feeling of wearing your favorite worn-in pair of sweatpants on a Sunday morning, is ultimately the most attractive trait you can possess. It is attractive because it signals absolute, unshakable security in who you are. You aren't playing a game, you are just present.
I would challenge the listener right now to pause and deeply reflect on how these overlapping systems are operating in their own lives. Consider how your own cultural background, your specific attachment style, and your unique flirting style might be causing you to misread the well-intentioned people around you. Are you judging someone's lack of verbal affirmation as coldness when they're actually trying to show you profound love through high-context acts of service? Are you misinterpreting a polite flirt's cautious respect as total disinterest? Are you expecting someone to read your mind instead of just telling them what you need?
So let's look back at this incredible journey we've been on together. If you were feeling completely baffled at the start of this deep dive, you are now officially armed with the ultimate decoder ring for human attraction. You understand the neurochemical cocktails of cortisol, dopamine, and oxytocin that make your pupils dilate and your palms sweat. You know Jeffrey Hall's 5 flirting styles and why that polite person at the coffee shop was so confusing. You understand the deep evolutionary perception biases, why men overperceive interest and women are highly skeptical of it. You recognize the dark slot machine psychology of digital breadcrumbing. And finally, you understand the vital cultural frameworks of high and low context and the absolute transformative power of emotional vulnerability.
It is a vast, complex amount of knowledge we have covered. But remember, psychological knowledge is most valuable when it is understood, internalized, and practically applied to your own interactions and relationships.
Before we go, we want to leave you with a final mind-expanding question to chew on. Something we haven't explicitly covered today, but that builds directly on all this source material about how technology intercepts biology. As technology continues to accelerate at a breakneck pace, as virtual reality environments become indistinguishable from physical ones, as emotionally responsive AI companions become normalized, and as we begin to interact through digital avatars, will our primal biological hardware eventually force a mass societal rebellion? Will our deep, ancient evolutionary need for actual physical touch, literal pupil dilation, and genuine chemical bonding make us reject this digital dating landscape entirely?
Or will human evolution do what it always does? Adapt.
Exactly. Will we create a completely new, digitized attachment style where our brains literally learn to feel true, fulfilling oxytocin bonding through a screen with an AI or a completely fabricated avatar?
It is a profound, slightly unsettling question about the future trajectory of human evolution. Will our ancient biology ultimately conquer our modern technology, or will technology successfully rewrite our biology?
Something for you to ponder the next time you are mindlessly swiping right on a dating app. Or, better yet, the next time you lock eyes with someone across a crowded room and feel that undeniable surge of adrenaline. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.